Hello and welcome for our news summary of March 21st, 2019, coming from Japan, of course, Tokyo, Japan. This summary is covering the period of a little bit short of the last week. This is the third of these video vlog summaries, seeing if it gains an audience or not. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. Our top story was kind of coverage of a U.S. Government report from the U.S. State Department, which looked at all countries in the world and their human rights records. And we went and focused, of course, on the Japan page to see what the U.S. State Department would say about Japan. And then we offered extensive excerpts of that in our print report that goes along with this video report. I really encourage you to take a look at that print report because it's in considerable more detail than I'm going to give you here. But let me just kind of make the case for why it's important to take a look at this. First of all, it comes from the U.S. government. Now, you may see a positive part of that and a negative part of that. A positive part of that is that the United States is Japan's closest ally. It's an important ally. So when it makes criticisms of human rights issues in Japan, you can pretty much be guaranteed that it's coming from a friendly position, right? They're not looking to humiliate or to criticize Japan. In fact, quite the opposite. If anything, they're going to softball the issues. So it means that to some extent, the evidence of the problems in Japan's human rights records that this report points out is more or less a global consensus of what Japan's human rights problems that they need to address really are. Now, of course, some people, defenders of Japan or just those who look at the United States policies, especially under the Trump administration, but really any U.S. administration, may immediately say, hey, look, who is the United States to be pointing out human rights issues in Japan when, the grievous human rights violations are probably much more going on much more in the United States than they are going on in Japan. And that's true. But, there's no reason to fall into that kind of whataboutism. If factual information is put out there, it should be respected no matter what the source is. And like I said, the fact that it's coming from a Japanese ally gives it a degree of extra validity that maybe it wouldn't have if it was coming from a country which had an interest in making Japan look bad. So please check that out in the print report that goes along with this video snapshot. Let's go on and take a look at other issues. The unified local elections basically are kicking off from today as I'm recording this. That means that there are, for example, 11 governor's races are kicking off. The first wave, the first round of these elections is on April 7th. As I look at the various races and where they stand, at least at the gubernatorial level, it could very well be a Liberal Democratic Party sweep of all 11. It's kind of, it's not, the opposition is just not strong at all. They can't even put up candidates in many of these places, except for the Japan Communist Party, which, always loses these elections. It's really kind of if you want to get depressed about the state of Japanese democracy, take a look at how non-competitive most of these local gubernatorial races are. The one which could go the other way is Hokkaido. In that situation, you have one candidate, Mr. Suzuki, who is backed by the Liberal Democratic Party and Komeito and the Government Party, and then on the other side, a candidate who is backed by all of the opposition. That's Tomohiro Ishikawa, the former aide to Ichiro Ozawa. So with the possible exception of Hokkaido, it looks like it's already, even at the beginning of the race, that it's pre-decided that the conservatives are going to do very well on that night. So we'll find out on April 7th if the opposition can at least pull out that one major victory. But It's just not a good situation. The Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, supposedly the main opposition party, doesn't even have candidates to run in the races. So, how can you have a democratic system when there's really no alternative? It's a long story. Yes, well, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in international affairs is up to his usual tricks, which means pushing the envelope on what the kinds of pro-military policies which has characterized him, since the beginning, and it's gotten to the point now that he will essentially argue that anything is consistent with Article 9 of the Constitution. He's now proposing that to have long-range cruise missiles in the Japanese arsenal. Supposedly, that is also allowed under the pacifist constitution of Japan. As we saw somewhat recently, aircraft carriers are now being deemed as consistent with the Constitution. Marine forces that assault beaches are now seen as consistent with Article 9 of the Constitution. Somebody might as well just ask him what isn't. I mean, there's practically nothing at this point which this government doesn't, argue is consistent with the Constitution. And fundamentally, it goes right back to what we just talked about in the last section, which is that there's no competition. The opposition parties don't even have enough candidates to run against the ruling party. So, there's not even really a seriously competitive political system right now. It's and so long as the Abe government is not seriously challenged, and even structurally, it seems impossible even for the opposition parties to really challenge him in the near term. Then why not just run roughshod over the law and over common sense? He can have his way, and there's no one to stop him. And that's where we're at right now. In Okinawa, there's a dugong, one of the animals which is very endangered, and which the campaigners against the Hinoko base building have said need to be protected, and that's why we can't build the U.S. base here. Well, one of the very few that still remains was found dead. Not exactly in the Hinoko area. It was found on the other side of the island, but it's hard to say, scientifically if there was any direct connection with the Hinoko base building, but symbolically, to have the forcible building of the Hinoko base for the U.S. Marines and the dismissing of the democracy of the Okinawan people in the recent referendum and many cases before, and now you find one of these dugong floating belly up in the ocean nearby. It's almost like democracy is floating belly up in the ocean in Japan right now. Tsunekazu Takeda, who has been since 2001 the head of the Japanese Olympic Committee, is finally being forced out. This relates to a bribery investigation which is being done on him. The bribery is not something he necessarily did on his own part. If the allegations are true, this was part of Japan's campaign to win the 2020 Olympics, against other countries or other cities around the world. We don't know yet whether or not there's any truth to these allegations, but we do know that Takeda has been pressured to finally resign. And according to the reporting, the pressure that forced him out did not come from anyone on the Japanese government side. It was the International Olympic Committee who made it clear that he needed to go. So he's not actually leaving right this moment. He'll remain until June. He basically just won't run for a new term. But anyway, Takeda's out, so he won't be the man in charge at the time of the 2020 Olympics, which allegedly he was involved in bribing to obtain for Tokyo. Finally, let's do one bit from society section, and that's that the Tokyo District Court has found Mark Karpeles, the founder of the Bitcoin exchange Mt. Gox, not guilty of embezzlement, although they did find him guilty of data manipulation, and they gave him a suspended sentence. It's really quite remarkable. Finding him not guilty of embezzlement, even though it's not being admitted, that means that the prosecutor's case against him was garbage. Uh, you know, if there's any doubt at all about your guilt, essentially you're going to, and the prosecutors come after you in Japan and they make a big deal out of it and it's all over the media, and then you're going to be put away. And the fact that he was found not guilty of embezzlement means that the facts must have lined it up very clearly that he didn't embezzle the money, and that they gave him some kind of a sentence just to save the face of the prosecutors. That's unfortunately the way that the Japanese system works. But considering the deep trouble that he had been in a couple of years ago over this issue, the fact that he's not having to go back to jail, I'm sure that he's quite happy about that. It's a big case. I'm not really the Bitcoin expert of the world, but I do know that his company, Mt. Gox, was a big player in its day. And that saga, now that chapter seems to have come to an end with Karpeles getting a suspended sentence, and the prosecutors essentially proving that they didn't have a case, but they won't quite admit it. Okay, well, that'll be it for today's little summary. I'll be back probably within the next 3 or 4 days or week, and we'll go on to number 4. So thank you for joining us, and of course, we'll keep you informed about the latest developments in Japanese news.